Hey. Hey everybody, Sean O'Connor here for Paper Cuts from Macabre Daily, and I am with none other than Michael Wehunt, who has now become my favorite author. We were just talking about the October Film Hunt, his debut novel, and it will be the number one novel of the year. You'll see that in the review that's going to post next week when the novel releases. This is just everything that I was looking for in a horror novel, and we were just talking about the fact that it's an absolute love letter not only to horror literature but horror film. Michael Wehunt, thank you for being with me tonight.
And thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, I'm going to point out what an absolute gem of a person you are, because I had to reschedule and Michael didn't even hesitate, said absolutely not a problem. So I greatly appreciate it. It meant the world to me.
No problem. I was glad I could do it.
Same. I've been really looking forward to speaking with you. So let's get into it. We've got your short story collection, Greener Pastures, and then we have the short story collection, The Inconsolables. The Inconsolables I picked up in a bookstore in Providence, Rhode Island. There's really great Gothic bookstore that just specializes in horror. And I saw the cover and I said, "Oh, I've been hearing a lot about this scoundrel, Michael Wehunt, and I've got to read some of these stories." And boy, oh boy, did that set me on a path with your work. And then when I find out that you're going to write a novel, and I hear the October Film Haunt. And I came about it because I started seeing Instagram posts from authors that I highly respect, and they're championing the book. And this is ages ago. And they're like, "Oh, everybody put this book on your radar." So when I have authors recommending other authors and they're like, "Stop the presses, this is what you're looking for," I get, it's like I'm sitting crisscross applesauce and I'm 9 years old and I'm 2 inches away from the TV and I've got Chiller Theater on. It's it's everything to me. Let's talk a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, Michael. Whatever you're comfortable with telling the viewers about yourself. I just want to know where you're from and how you came into horror, if it was a childhood thing or if you came into it later on in life.
Yeah, well, my name's Michael, obviously, and I live in the Atlanta area. And I was born in Georgia and I've spent my entire life in Georgia. That hasn't always been intentional. I just can't seem to get away. So, without really meaning to put my roots down here, I did. And, like my job keeps me here, my partner's job keeps us here. So, here I am. Yeah, I grew up reading, well, once I got into like middle school, reading like Southern Gothic, Flannery O'Connor, and the like. So as a Southerner, I do definitely try to embrace that mentality and that heritage as far as it comes to literature. Although once you start digging into the lives of a lot of those authors, it's not always pleasant. But got to take the bad with the good, inform your opinion and your mentality. As far as horror goes, although I would argue that Southern Gothic frequently veers into horror, but pure traditional horror would probably be when I was 7 years old. I somehow was allowed to watch The Exorcist, and I don't remember the actual experience. I just remember the emotional impact that it had on me. It was just really strange. And according to my mom, she kind of kept an eye on me for a couple of weeks. And she said I never had a nightmare. I never cried in the night or anything like that. So, you know, months later, whenever it was, when I asked to see another horror movie, she said, okay. And then I got to start watching them. I had a giant Freddy Krueger poster on my wall right above my bed, starting from the age of 9 or 10. So it was definitely planted early in me. And as far as literature goes, like everybody else watching this, I'm sure I started reading Stephen King from a young age and fell in love with all that and that whole world. Actually drifted away from horror for a while, and like my late teens and 20s. I was still a constant reader. I would still buy the new Stephen King book when it came out just because, it, he kind of transcended everything. But I look back and I regret not digging into horror when I was really young because I think it would have benefited me in a lot of ways. But then I also have to acknowledge the fact that I wouldn't be the writer I am if I had just been a horror fanatic my entire life. Who knows what in my writer DNA would be different. So I try to just, you know, love what I have, love what I am. And, when I did get back into horror, I got back into it heavily and started really expanding my horizons and reading small press authors and, grabbing an edition of Ellen Datlow's Best Horror of the Year and like discovering all these writers like John Langan and Laird Barron and Elizabeth Hand and just really just becoming voracious about it. And that was a lot of fun and I'm grateful for that. And it just kind of like all melted together into whatever weird amalgam I ended up being. And so far, I've published two story collections, which you mentioned already, Greener Pastures, and several years later, The Inconsolables. Put out a couple of limited edition novellas, but The October Film Hunt is my first novel, so I'm been having quite a different experience in the lead up to that, and it's been really fascinating. I've been learning a lot. I have already written my second novel. I'm editing it right now, so
That thrills me, by the way.
trying to get the wheels turning and trying to generate momentum so that I can become a very, very consistent writer rather than, there were 7 years between my two collections, busy life and all that. It took me a while to get around to writing my first novel, but now that I've done that, I want to be, you know, maybe every year and a half or so, new novel, and then every 5 years, new collection, whatever the path ends up being.
I love hearing that. Nothing thrills me more than hearing that you're going to do novels continuously. Do you think that you will kind of, parse those out with a short story collection as well every now and then?
I would love to because my first love was short stories. When I look back at my childhood, there are certain Stephen King novels that stand out as touchstones, like they do for a lot of people. But in my heart, I always remember being a little kid and reading his short stories. And then I had this really old collection called Alfred Hitchcock Presents Stories That Scared Even Me, I think was the title of it. And I just read that over and over and over again, and just things like that. Just really, I loved short fiction from a young age. And it's weird all these years later to realize that people don't generally love short story collections. The novel is king, but I always hold a special place in my heart. So I would hope that I would be able to write more short stories, but it's always going to come down to time. Like I've written one short story in the last 4 years, and that was because I finished my novel, sent it to my editor, and then I had about a month before she sent them back for edits. And so I was like, I'm going to write a short story. It's been 4 years. So it felt so good to like kind of shrink my muscles back down and become this smaller, stealthier creature who could just, write 6,000 words. And it was surreal and it was like coming home. But now that I'm experienced in writing novels, I have worked out those muscles and I know what it takes. And there's a lot of fascination there too. So,
Yeah. Well,
oh,
I feel like you, Nathan Ballingrud, it's funny that you brought up John Lang, and I consider, the three of you, your short stories are just devastating. They're so good, they're so rich and atmospheric, but they pack a wallop as well. I really do enjoy your short stories. I love that you're writing novels now. Don't get me wrong, especially with the October Film Haunt. But yeah, no, it's how I cut my teeth on Michael Wehunt. Reading these stories, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. I don't want to assume anything, but I know that it was a bit of time between the novel and the last collection, but I feel with those two collections, and there was time between those as well, but it really felt like you had this novel percolating. And I know, or I shouldn't say I know, but I'm guessing that the genesis of it came from the October film hunt under the house story in greener pastures. So that was the acorn. But do me a favor, tell me how the novel came about, expanding it into, I mean, this metatextual occult slasher amalgam of perfection that we have.
Yeah, well, Adam Neville is to blame for this novel existing probably because many years ago, I think it was 2017, he read Greener Pastures and he singled out that story in a post he made about how much he liked the book. And he said that he wished October Film Hunt Under the House had been a novel. And I was like, I'm not ready to write a novel yet. I was still basically a baby writer at that time. But, I kind of filed it away. Like it kind of sprouted tentacles in my brain and latched on. And, years later, I wrote a story called The Pine Arch Collection, which is in the Inconsolables. And I found myself revisiting that October Film Hunt world with completely different characters, but both stories were kind of homages to found footage horror, and they both involved mysterious groups on the periphery making these films. Why were they making these films? Because I'm kind of fascinated with the idea of a found footage movie where the bad guys are the ones with the camera, so to speak. It's not the protagonist running around with a camera and having to give them a reason to not throw the camera down and run away and the movie ends, like just to get that suspension of disbelief. But what if the antagonist is the one filming the camera and terrorizing people is, the point of the film to some degree. So those two stories together, and I actually wrote a few other stories that were kind of lightly connected to the Pine Arch Research Group. So I realized that this was becoming a story universe of sorts.
Okay.
And I was always a big fan of, Laird Barron's Children of Old Leech. More and more and more of his stories started to connect with each other. And that was, fascinated me when I was first starting to like really see who was out there writing horror fiction in the world today. So basically I was like, okay, I should write a novel now. I I have I have enough stories for my second collection. I can just put that aside for a minute. I don't need any more stories. Let's write a novel. So remembered what Adam Neville said, the tentacles flexed. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And I didn't want to just expand the story into a novel because the original story was kind of when you really broke it down, it was just a cosmic horror Lovecraftian type of thing that was just told and found materials and footage. And nothing wrong with a Lovecraftian novel. I just didn't want to write one, especially not for my first. I love I love cosmic horror when it's kind of on the periphery, when it's a possibility, when it's really speaking to the unknowability of something,
Yeah.
but not so much where there's Cthulhu stomping toward the ocean with his tentacles and occult worshiping. That's just not something I really wanted to do. So I started thinking about the whole cursed film thing because, obviously October Film Hunt's going to be revolving around some sort of a movie. And I knew I wanted it to have different characters than the original story. I knew I wanted it to revolve around a different movie this time and just like a blank, bigger canvas that would at some point fold that original story into it,
Yeah.
but not be dependent upon that original story. So then, things started locking into place, and I'm just, I had this fascination with, urban legends, how urban legends exist in the age of the internet and social media, and how folklore has sort of changed because of the internet, because of our constant connectedness. And a campfire story that once would have been 8 people sitting in a circle, it can now be 8,000 or 80,000, or even if it goes viral, 800,000. So how would that affect an urban legend? I thought about things like Slender Man, and even the real world tragedy that came out of the Slender Man myth. Um, and I was all these thoughts started coming around. I don't want to like word vomit them all out right now in case you want to touch on anything later. But um, so yeah, it definitely had its genesis in that original story. I just wanted to take a very different angle to look at that sort of cursed film, mysterious director, uh, cult horror type of thing.
This is a perfect moment, if you don't mind, because the novel hasn't released yet. It's coming out next week. Would you mind telling the viewers a little bit about the novel?
Sure. So basically, about 10 years ago, there was this group called the October Film Hunt. They, once a year or so, usually in October, hence the name, they would all get together and travel to the filming location of a horror movie of some sort. Typically, like an indie cult favorite horror movie, but sometimes a mainstream one, like it's mentioned that they did. They went to the sanitarium and from the original Phantasm movie as their very first film hunt. But so they have this really popular blog that just gets, and they just become horror influencers basically, and like great things are happening for them. They have a lot, tens and tens of thousands of followers. Then they visit a cemetery used in the filming of this movie called Proof of Demons, and this was about 2013 or so. And they camp out in this near this cemetery, and then soon after they post something on their blog about this crazy experience that happened to them while they were there. And then from that moment forward, things start to go wrong. And someone tragically dies. There are other terrible ramifications, and the group falls apart, and all the members are sort of, you know, not to use the term cancel culture, but that's kind of what happens to them.
Yes.
Everything blows up in their faces. They're blamed for this death. As the novel begins, we're 10 years in the future, where the main person in the October Film Hunt, Jory Stroud, has left her life of horror behind. She lost her book deal, she lost her screenwriting deal, she had a child, and now she lives in northern Vermont, far away from Atlanta, where she grew up. And she lives with her 8-year-old son and just has a very quiet life with nothing scary in it at all. She just completely shuns everything that's horror related. She lives in regret. She just tries to keep her head down. And then one day, a VHS tape shows up in the mail, and she can't resist. She pops it into her old VHS player, and suddenly she's watching these scenes that seem like they're from the movie Proof of Demons. It soon becomes kind of obvious to her that someone might be out there making a sequel. And even worse, she starts to believe that someone's filming her as though she's in the sequel. And meanwhile, the other surviving member of the October Film Hunt is pulled into things. A very well-known horror artist is pulled into things. A star from the original movie finds himself being pulled into this supposed sequel. And then there's a final character who has nothing to do with horror, no interest in horror. He has his own problems in his life, but somehow this movie is targeting him as well. And the thing about Proof of Demons that has helped it endure on the internet and on Reddit forums and social media is that it's rumored to have an occult ritual embedded in the actual film. So by watching it, you're participating in an occult ritual. You're helping carry out an occult ritual, and enough people are gathered together watching it, something might happen, a door might open. There are all these rumors on the internet and people saying that they've actually seen the entity from the movie out in the real world. There's all these crazy rumors swirling. And then when the sequel starts going into production, so to speak, things escalate pretty quickly.
Boy, do they. I, in the best, most horrible ways imaginable. I I can't. I'm have to watch my mouth because it's big, and it runs on it by itself. I don't want to spoil anything. It's going to be very challenging for me because all I want to do is talk about this novel. But let's talk about some of the themes, some of the terror involved in it. Um, Before I hit record, I was telling Michael that I went to NYU and I was surrounded by Jories and I was surrounded by Rickies. We'll get to the Rickies. Well, that'll make more sense in a moment. But I was steeped, and I wasn't a film student, but I just happened to be in that circle, and I was kind of on the periphery, and I would watch these debates and sometimes participate in them. Kind of like jump in, jump out. But the vast knowledge that all of these film students had, but it was like gladiator school, Michael, because it was never a circumstance of, oh, you like Rio Bravo, well, you would probably also love The Searchers. It was, oh, you like Rio Bravo, well, you don't know shit because you should like The Searchers. So it was always combative. That's kind of like the Ricky aspect on a minor level. But there was this, I was surrounded by a culture of obsession. And that's what really resonated in the novel with me because I recognized it in myself, and probably you as well, where if you love film and particularly horror movies, it's easy to get obsessed. It really is. One subgenre bleeds into the next, literally. So you can cut your teeth on Creature Feature, and before you know it, you're obsessed with Italian giallo films. And that could lead you to, who knows where. All of a sudden, you're into, Asian horror, J horror, and it's endless. And sometimes it's like a loop that eats itself because there's familiar themes within all of these subgenres. So I dined out on this novel, and it really felt. There were times where I put it down because I was just getting these nostalgic flashbacks. Most good, some not. The obsessive quality to it is so prevalent in 2025 where, if you want to believe in something, and I think this is a theme to the novel, if you want to believe in something so much and so badly that you can actually manifest it and give it exponential power, and that felt almost too close for comfort in 2025 for what's going on politically in our society. When you were writing the novel during the time frame, did those themes resonate with you?
Uh, yeah, in a big, big way. You really nailed a lot of it there, but I thought of it like this novel coming from two contrasting places. On the one hand, there's the joy of horror fandom because I really wanted to convey that because I feel it so deeply. And there's every people loved all kinds of different genres and subgenres, and everybody's taste is subjective, and whatever makes them happy makes me happy because that's great. But there's something about horror, and of course I'm biased, but the love people have for the horror genre just feels a little purer than it does for other things. Like I don't I've never come across science fiction fans who just have the same fervor and the same just happiness,
I
just
agree.
radiant joy about their movies and their books. And, I feel that very deeply. So that was one of my starting points. And then contrasting that on the other side of the coin, you have the sometimes malignant nature of online discourse and how it's been trending in recent years and how much time we spend on screens, and how it's starting to rewire our brains and the way we think and the way we process information. And just these algorithms really have their hooks in us and they're manipulating us and they're genuinely changing the way the human brain works.
Yeah.
And that's not any more evident than it is when it comes to belief. And you touched on belief a moment ago. It's just fascinating and horrifying to me that, um, when you come across information on the internet, you can just choose to believe it. And whether it's your confirmation bias pushing you, you got into an argument with your neighbor and you saw this obviously untrue thing, but you get to the point where you don't even think about the fact that it's not true. It hits you as truth, it hits you as fact, and you don't bother doing any research. And so the next thing you know, you're in this silo and you're just like being hit with all these untruths and these falsehoods, and you just absorb them all as though they're real,
Yeah.
and your beliefs get fortified, and you build this entire fantasy world based on these things. And what is that doing to us? So you have the whole political side to that, which is, far and away the most prevalent way we see these things and the most alarming way we see these things because they have such gigantic repercussions in the world. But then there's also things like just rumors in a friend group. Someone's life can be damaged because of some rumor that was spread. And then when you can spread a rumor on such a wide scale, possibly even going viral with it, that's not as important as geopolitical ramifications, but it's still pretty important. And then I was thinking about how this sort of thing could apply to folklore and an urban legend, and I was thinking about tulpas and things that can be manifested through thought. And if you take, instead of just thought, you have actual conviction and belief that is gaining momentum and becoming stronger, you really start to wonder if there could be an occult element to that because, you know, things that we take for granted today would have seemed like sorcery 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So who's to say that what we're experiencing now would obviously feel like sorcery in the past, but we don't really understand it, is my point. And what if, in a world where belief defeats truth and belief is more important than truth, there's a real occult sense to that, and you're basically reaching a point where you're dealing with almost the supernatural in a real sense, because
Completely agree.
nature is based on truth, science is based on nature. You have all these things locked together, and we've relied on those for a while now, but those things are breaking down, not because they're flawed, but because belief and propaganda and misinformation are attacking them. And at this point in time, at least, those belief and propaganda and all that are more powerful than nature and science and facts and reality. That kind of is a cult. Who's to, it's kind of the same as summoning a demon in a way when you really want to look at it. And Carl Sagan, in his book Candle in the Dark, he actually kind of writes about this. He uses demonology and ancient peoples not understanding the world around them, so they would just assume it's all demons doing this and this and that. And when the candle goes out, the candle was belief in his analogy, then we'll be thrown back into an ancient mindset where we believe the sun is a demon in the sky, just trying to burn us. And it's just this whole thing I could talk about for an hour because it's so broad, but it's just really fascinating.
It is fascinating.
So the joy of horror versus the malignant potential of obsession, to use the word you used a few minutes ago. Like, how do these two obsessions coexist? How do they reconcile? Could good things happen? Could bad things happen? And that was just really making my mind turn over and over. And then meanwhile, I was really interested in taking the slasher subgenre and the occult, demon possession, uh, hereditary type of subgenre. And I was like, these two things never really exist together.
They don't.
What would happen if they did? So here I'm taking two thematic things and smushing them together. And I'm taking two genre elements and smushing them together and kind of, sort of making a structure out of those four elements and just seeing what would happen really. And having a cursed film at the center of it all, just it, it just really all seemed to click for me. But yeah, I wish it could be just a pure escapist type of story where no one even gets on the internet.
Yeah.
But I really did want to examine these things and think about them. So, there's some inevitable social media going on. There's some inevitable Reddit threads where this funeral watching, and when you read the book, you'll understand on page one what funeral watching means. Um, this as this viral trend spreads throughout the country and the world, I just all these threats could start coming in, and I was like, yes, I can do everything I want because of this and this and this. And I liked having a slasher villain, so to speak, and a more occult demon-ish entity threat over here, and they're both coming at the characters, and it made it a lot of fun.
It's so much fun to read, Michael. It really is because I mean, you need to take your time with this novel. And please take that as a compliment. It's because of your prose and because the way you set a scene and your setting and your characters, you really do need to take your time and absorb it, and it pays off tremendously. I want to talk a little bit about that slasher and that occult aspect because you're right. To my knowledge, it's never been done before till now. Talk to me a little bit about the research for that because, you're purposefully taking these two subgenres, and you're combining them. What did you lean on? What did you watch? What did you research? Take me through that.
Well, I'll take a second to talk about the film itself, Proof of Demons, that the book kind of revolves around. I kind of used I've been on a couple of podcasts already prior to today, and two different people have brought up Begotten, this Elias Merhaj. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce his last name, but it's an experimental horror film from the, I think, early 90s. Very, very, very weird. So like I had only seen it once, so I rewatched that, and that confirmed that I didn't want the movie Proof of Demons to be purely experimental. I wanted to take a straightforward kind of idea and then work these experimental elements into it. And the experimental elements are very jarring within the framework of the movie, so that when the characters and the people online, everybody are watching the movie, these segments really stand out to them, and that fuels the belief that these segments have occult power in them. So to do that, I just, like I said, I watched Begotten again. I thought about that sort of movie. Um, actually, when I was near the end of writing the book, I saw Skinamarink. Is
Okay.
also a very abstract, experimental sort of horror movie. So it was like another little data point for me. But I also, thought about basic things like the Scream series, definite influence going into the Proof of Demons concept. And then also the larger book itself, because things that are in the movie Proof of Demons absolutely do start showing up in the actual book
Yeah.
in a very real way. So the begotten elements kind of come out of the book, out of the movie into the story. The Scream homage, so to speak, kind of comes out. The Hereditary, The Exorcist, just really all I wanted to do is just watch my favorites, just watch my comfort food movies, the classics, and just let them all bleed into that and inform the larger novel as well. Um, but yeah, like I had already been kind of on a slasher kick, trying to fill in some gaps that I never got around to in the past. So like all that was pretty fresh in my mind.
Okay.
And I mentioned Hereditary. It's one of my favorite movies of the last ever. I knew I wanted to have some, I wanted to borrow from that just a little bit. And it made me want to, even though Payman is generally kind of lodged into the Judeo Christian type of demonology. Like you can find his name, and Ari Aster, when he was writing the movie, clearly used an actual known demonic entity's name for his script. But other than that, Hereditary was almost entirely secular. There wasn't a priest in the movie,
No.
and that really appealed to me. And I wanted this novel to look at demonology from a very secular perspective. Now, I really wanted to drive that home. I wanted an entity that wouldn't care if it went into a church, that wouldn't care if it bumped into a priest and the priest held up a crucifix to be like, yeah, what's that?
Yeah.
I just, a lot of traditional demon movies kind of rely on that old trope where a priest comes in to save the day, and I didn't want that hero to be able to come in and have any real impact at all.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think those three types of movies, like demon, slasher, and to a lesser degree experimental, kind of informed the movie at the heart of the book and the book itself. And mainly, I just, like I said earlier, I just wanted to see if slasher and occult could coexist,
Well, they
and
can.
that just really fascinated me.
You proved it. It's funny that you bring up Gotten. I was on a podcast. I guessed on a podcast the other week, and Stephen Bissett, who's a renowned comic book artist, we had to pick our number one movie of the '90s, horror movie of the '90s, and that was his. And I'd never seen it before, and I'm avoiding it like the plague because he's like, it's an absolute bummer, but you have to watch it. So I know I'm going to get to it, but I'm like, all right, I have to be in the right frame of mind. Not yet, not yet, but soon.
It's
Do you mind? Oh,
pretty
sorry.
it's pretty impenetrable. Like you just watch it late at night when you're tired, and it'll really mess with you.
Great. Okay. Okay. If you say so, I'll do it. Okay. The the movie, jeez. The novel is terrifying on multiple levels. We've talked about the occult aspect and the slasher aspect, but I think it's that fanaticism that is the most terrifying aspect of it. When you're writing, is it what's and I'm assuming that there are fun parts and it's not just, work. Um, But what is the most fun aspect of a novel like the October Film Haunt to write? What do you hit that sweet spot and you're like dining out on it?
Probably the passages, and I tried to put a lot of moments in there. Even when something scary is happening, I tried to put a little blip of that horror joy. Even if it's ironic in the moment, even if the character kind of gets mad at themselves for feeling it. Um, but then there are also a few like longer passages that are like directly speaking to being a fan of horror and what it's like. And just, I always think of it as um, like a visceral reaction. Like, even if you don't jump at jump scares, and even if you don't cringe and have to cover your eyes, because I'm not that type of person. I can just stare at the movie and someone might think that I'm dead inside, but I am reacting like a lot. I just don't show it, but it might just be like a chill that goes up my arm, and but that chill is precious to me, and it's like a very visceral thing. And ever since I was a little kid, I've been chasing that feeling,
That's
and
it. Yes.
really wanted to convey the feeling of chasing that and always wanting that horror moment, or the moment before the moment, when you know it's about to hit and you're anticipating it. Like, there's just it's kind of like a drug. And
Mhm.
so when I was touching on those things while I was writing, it's definitely raised the enjoyment level up a notch, because I was just, you know, writing about how it's kind of like a drug was kind of like a drug.
Well, Jory picks up almost immediately to reference, to use a drug reference. It honestly is between when she gets the tape, and this isn't a spoiler. This happens right in the beginning of the book for the viewers. When she gets the tape, it's hours before that's in the VCR is in the deck. I mean, she just can't help it. And it's to your point, it's that, you know, I got to feed the beast. I'm chasing that scare from wherever it imprinted on me in my life. Typically, it's childhood. Um, and you're trying to duplicate it. And then you're upping the October Film Haunt is upping the stakes because like, not only are we trying to duplicate it, to do so, we're going to go to these locations. Like, we're really going to increase the experience and make it as visceral as possible. And that spoke to me as well. Really trying to take an experience and make it as real and as extreme as possible with safety in mind, but then sometimes not. you know and I just that aspect of the novel, just like I said, it just crushed me. All right, let's talk about a couple of fun things. Not that the novel isn't fun. Love it. Everyone needs to get it, please. But let's talk about a couple of fun things. We've mentioned occult and slasher. Would you mind telling me what your favorite is in both subgenres?
I'm probably going to be pretty boring here.
There's no bad answer.
As far as a cult goes, like, The Exorcist probably really is the best.
It's your gateway.
It was my gateway. It imprinted itself upon my soul, and even watching it now, like, from a more critical angle, like, I still admire the way the movie was made and the cinematography and everything. Hereditary is honestly a very close second. I dearly love that movie. I
Same.
really, really love it. I love Midsummer too, but Hereditary is my champion as far as like the modern era is concerned. Then there's a movie like A Dark Song, which takes a much more literal, serious approach to the occult. It's about a woman whose child dies, and she finds this occultist and enlists him to do this really, really, really complicated occult ritual to try to let her have contact with her dead child. And if you have any interest in the occult, which, I am not an occultist, I know a little bit of stuff, but not a whole lot. But if you have any interest in the occult, like, that movie's pretty true to life. Like what you see being done in that movie is not far off from what would actually be done. So I really recommend it. As
I
far
love
as
yeah,
slashers, sorry.
I loved it. A Dark Song, yeah, great film.
For slashers, again, probably going to be boring. Like I like a lot of Argento films that do lean into that side of yellow. Um, but I would have to go with Nightmare on Elm Street. It my it's it's just I saw it not as early as when I saw The Exorcist, but A Nightmare on Elm Street probably had the biggest impact on me out of every horror movie I ever saw growing up.
That's great.
I've probably seen it 40 or 50 times. I can watch it at any point. The other ones I watch a lot less often, even though I do like them all for various reasons and to various degrees. But the original movie is just so good. And I love Halloween is a classic for an obvious reason. Probably my biggest comfort food is like I'm not doing well right now. I need to watch a bunch of this stuff that'll just help me through this. I'll watch all the Scream movies.
Nice.
But the more recent ones, I do like them for the most part, but ever since Wes Craven passed away and the Radio Silence guys took over, they've been doing a good job, but the movies have gotten so much meaner. They're like really just cynical and cruel, which, for the themes, they're they're made in more modern times when things are bleaker and darker. So their movies should reflect that. But it gets a little bit harder to watch them. But the first four Screams, it's just like so it's like lying in a hammock. It's really the equivalent of lying in a hammock on a gorgeous fall day for me. So
Perfect. Perfect. And you beat me to the punch because I was going to ask you what your comfort horror go-to is. So excellent. Well played. All right, that might be oh no, I'm sorry. I do have a few more questions, quick ones. What and you can't say family because that's the go-to answer for everyone. What terrifies you the most?
that's difficult because I don't really get scared.
I
And
know you're cool hand Luke over here.
Jory, my main protagonist in the book, that part of me is really coming out in her too, where she talks about being jealous of friends who get scared watching horror movies and they have to check behind the shower curtain before they go to bed, and they're worried about something being underneath, and how she wishes she could feel that. I also wish I could feel that, but staying away from the state of the world and where we might be headed and where this country might be headed, because I think that's kind of a cop out answer, and nobody wants to be bummed out in this very moment while they're watching or a podcast about horror.
No, I know, but it is the biggest horror that we have ahead of us. But
I do think that the sort of technological, uh, internet based, even physical media based horror like The Ring or Cairo, The Pulse, um, radio transmissions, the fact that there could be something transmitted over that. And if there is some sort of, because I want to believe in the supernatural for the most part. Like I want to see a ghost. I want to walk into a cold spot. I want to feel something touch me. No, and I want to know how I'd react. That's part of the desire.
have you
And
ever had a supernatural experience?
no, I used to try when I was young. I would go to various places that had legends attached to them, and I would try really hard, but I always felt like there was something that was just my skepticism was too big, and it
Okay.
would it would just kind of like turn a switch off inside of me, and I would just go blank, and I just if there was something there, which I don't think there was, but if there was, I don't think I was open to receiving it. I was like an antenna that had been lowered.
Okay.
But I would like to believe, but when I do think about the supernatural, like r- radio stations and TV static and uh, music and film and VHS tapes, like those things do become frightening to me. It's just that I can't really answer you because I can't remove that middle layer of skepticism.
Yeah.
There's always something that's just not letting it get to me all the way. Um, so outside of real world stuff and family, like you said, um, that's really the only answer I can give.
All right. That's a great answer. Great answer. Look, can you give me just 1 minute? I have to tell you my hereditary story, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because I feel like I'm dead inside as well. I can't be scared. You know, I've seen so many horror films and I want to. Well, I saw Hereditary at a theater, Sawgrass Theater in Florida. I'm there for business, and I'm like, you know what? I want to kill some time. I'm going to go across the street to this mall. I'm going to go see the movie. And then the movie theater was outside the mall. So I cut through the mall and I go to the theater, and there's 4 people inside. There's myself, and there's 3 teenagers that are sitting 2 rows in front of me, and they're so loud, and you know, it's as teenagers should be. And the movie starts, and here's the power of the film: you could hear a pin drop for the next 2 hours. I don't even think the 4 of us were breathing. And the film ends, and we all get up, and we're kind of, you know, they turn around and they're looking at me, and I'm looking at them. We're like, right? And we all agree, like, you know, shaking our heads, like, that was something. We need to process this. I go back. My car's on the other side of the mall, but now the mall is locked because the mall's closed. So I'm walking out on the perimeter in the parking lot, and Michael, I'm telling you right now, one by one, they started turning out the parking lot lights. And now I'm running toward my car, and it's getting quicker. And I've got my wife on the phone, and I'm going, look, I think I'm going to die. I think this is it. And as I'm talking to her, I run right into a ravine, and I go up to water up to my knees. Now, now the fear of possession is completely gone. Now I'm in Florida, and I'm like, well, I'm going to get bit by a snake or eaten by an alligator. Neither one happened. I got back to my hotel. I'm going into the lobby soaking wet, and the 2 people at the front desk are looking at me. I just don't ask. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I found that scare. It I discovered it again. It was such an experience for me. And I kept looking in the corner of my hotel room. I'm looking for Tony Collette. I'm a man now in my 50s, and I was scared like a child. And there's something fantastic about the power of horror, you know, that it can bring you right back there again. So, you know, for what it's worth, there's my hereditary story for you.
What would you have done if you'd heard in the middle of the night in the hotel room?
Shit my pants and died. How about that? How's that for an answer? That's exactly what would have happened.
You make me want to change my what terrifies me answer to something a lot simpler. It's just something standing across a dark room in a corner
Yeah.
where you can barely make out the shape of it. What's scarier than that?
Nothing. Nothing. I mean, yes, that's it right there. Sounds can be scary, but we can always rationalize. But when you're visually seeing an amorphous shape that shouldn't be there, that's the most terrifying thing in the world. One more story, and then I promise I'll let you go. This supports the novel and manifesting belief. I'm old enough that back in the 70s, there was Leonard Nimoy had a show In Search Of, and they played an episode about Bigfoot. And Michael, I'm telling you right now, after that episode aired, because there was no cable back then, so everybody watched TV. So you had millions of people watching this In Search Of. There were more Bigfoot. People were manifesting Bigfoot everywhere for the next year. Bigfoot was at the supermarket and behind the 7-Eleven, just all over the place. It is just the power of belief. You have taken it with the October film Haunt to this incredible, terrifying level. This moment for you, and I don't want to jinx anything. I want you to have a fantastic book launch, which I think it's going to be. The only thing that I'm going to add to it is that when I finished the novel, I was reminded of when House of Leaves came out. Not content, but the moment where this was something different. And when I read House of Leaves, it was that moment of like, wait, what? Wait. Oh, okay. So that's new. And this is the same damn thing. Completely original, completely Michael Wehunt, but it's the same damn thing. I'm so curious, and I'm going to be watching this release, and I'm going to be watching the reviews and the reactions, because I think the same thing is going to happen with your novel. I think that you have done something that is completely unique and genuine. I've already said it probably ad nauseum that this is a love letter to horror in all its forms. If you want to read great literature, pick up the October Film Haunt. But if you consider yourself anyone who is into horror, this is a must. It really is a must because you've given the community something different and unique and genuine and astounding. Look, I hope you're good at taking a compliment and this isn't cringy, but that's what you've done.
I'm not super great at taking compliments,
No
but
one is.
thank you. I mean, I can't tell you how much that means. It's like it's hitting me right in the heart, you know.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Look, you're a good person. I follow you. I follow your social presence, and I really do enjoy everything that you post and what you have to say, not only about horror but about the world in general. Um, you're my guy now, and I'm going to champion the October Film Haunt. I cannot wait for the next book. I don't even want to know about it. I don't want to know a thing about it. I want to come into this blind, and I just want to savor the experience. You're welcome back here anytime to talk about anything that you would like to.
Okay. Sounds good.
Excellent. Thank you for your time tonight. Good luck with the launch. Don't forget to hydrate. Take it slow and steady. And anything you need from Macabre Daily and from me, you say the word, you've got it.
Okay. Thank you. Seriously, thank you very much.
Anytime, Michael. This was an absolute pleasure. I was really looking forward to this. Go enjoy your night.
All right. You too. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Talk to you later.